Welcome to Masters of Self University podcast, your highest source of sacred truths and universal wisdom. Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Rachel Fiori, mystic, spiritual teacher, psychic healer, and founder of Masters of Self University. Join our journey of soul transformation as we deep dive into this latest episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Masters of Self University podcast. I'm your host, Ellie Lee.
And I'm your host, Danny Morley. And today we're going to be talking about Ellie and I's recent experience with doing, well, we started with a 3-day fast, but we technically went longer than that. And let's start with how this all began, which was Rachel Fiori, our incredible leader, our mentor, texted us and was like, let's do a 3-day fast. Let's do 72 hours. And this podcast isn't going to be about the science of fasting. It's going to be about Ellie and I sharing our personal experience with doing this work and healing what gets brought up and our experience of moving through it. So if you're looking for specific fasting advice, go read up on all the science. This is going to be about our personal experience. So 72 hours, that 3-day window is like the beautiful time to really kickstart the healing process of autophagy, which is just like cellular repair. So doing 3 days, you get into some of the good stuff. And of course, what gets brought up when you stop eating is all of your survival programs. So there was a lot that came up for me, and there was a lot that came up for you. So let's start with you. And what were your thoughts coming into this idea of, because you'd never done a fast longer than 24 hours before this, correct?
Mm-hmm. That is correct. I've never done anything longer than 24 hours. 24 hours to me was like death. To go 24 hours with food is insane. In this year alone, I've intermittent fasted a lot. And so I would go 18 to 21 hours, but never 24. And so when, we all started this 3-day fast, I could tell that I had been waiting for someone to say it so that I could do it. There was no way in hell that I was going to stop just like fast. I was going to start fasting on my own. There's no way in hell, because I have an addiction to food. I also use food as a coping mechanism. It's like the last vice that I have. I don't have the weed anymore, and I don't have, any of these other things. But to me, food was a way that I was getting through the everyday. But it was also tremendously hurting me and damaging me in all kinds of ways. I've spoken a lot about this. If you are a listener of this podcast, I have very, very severe gut issues. And over the past few years, especially last 2 years, my body has rejected more and more food. The consumption of the food intake that I had been doing prior to the last 2 years has dwindled down a lot, where now it came down to, well, I'm doing 1 meal a day and I'll do like some snacks. But even that I could tell was too much for my body. So when I started this 3-day fast, I could tell that I was ready for it. And the first 3 days, I realized I wasn't hungry at all. My stomach was so impacted and I was in so much pain. And when I'm in all of that pain and all of that discomfort, instead of allowing myself to feel what's in there, I go and I grab a snack. And I'll run this program of like, well, I need food, and like food is not a big deal and food doesn't hurt me, when in reality, like that is literally the most painful thing in my life right now. Is anytime I put anything in my body, it hurts me, which is a whole other podcast in itself. So I'll just start with the first 3 days. The first 3 days were very easy for me in terms of I didn't crave food. I wasn't losing it. I was good. Like I could tell my body was like, don't put anything in here, which really helped me, obviously, because I didn't put anything in there. And like we even went apple picking, and there was coffee and there was apple pie and all this stuff. And It was the first time where I was listening to my body, and my body was like, I want none of that. Like the idea of putting any of that into my body was so grotesque to me. And this is something that I've also been feeling this year, is like the idea that we put food into our body started to disgust me in some ways too, which was really fascinating for me to experience because I love food. Um, so it was really interesting to see how much my body's constantly communicating to me not to put anything into it, and yet how much I don't listen and keep feeding it, because the pleasure of it and the brain part of my brain that tells me we want that and bring that in, is I allow that to be stronger than what my body's actually asking for. So the first 3 days for me was very eye opening in that sense of like, holy crap, it's constantly saying no, no. And I'm going, no, I'm ignoring you and I'm putting it in. So the first 3 days, I'll start there, were easy for me. And I could feel my body just thanking me for that.
Yeah, we'll get to my experience like later on the podcast, but I had a more challenging time at the beginning, and then I remember, so we began the fast officially 5 p.m. on Wednesday, and with set to finish Saturday 5 p.m. And I had work Friday night, and then we'll get into that later. But I remember coming home from work that night. So this was started Wednesday, Thursday, now Friday, so over 48 hours. Probably at like 55, somewhere like that. And you had taken a turn. You all of a sudden, the last like 48 hours, you were fine. And
Yeah.
as soon as you got into that, like the day 3, which is after the 48-hour mark, in terms of time, um, something clicked in, and this happens when we fast. It's going to be different for everyone and where they're at, of what they're moving through, and what their body needs. But your body will go through different phases of basically cleanup, detoxification, and cleansing. And that can be physically, it can be energetically, and normally it means both. It means the physical detoxification process is also energetically bringing up things to the surface. So I remember coming home from work after you've been cruising for 2 days, and I've been suffering. I'm like, she's doing amazing, I'm proud of her, but wow, I can't believe she's not feeling it. And I got home from work, and you laid in bed, you said you felt sick.
Yeah.
Like, what started to happen coming into past hour 48 into technically that third day?
Yeah, third day I went to the gym, and when I went to the gym, I could barely lift the weights. And I was like, "Oh my god, I'm exhausted. Like I'm so drained right now." And so I went home, and that's when I started to feel like, "Ooh, I don't feel well." Like I started to feel really weak and really drained. I had no energy. I could barely do anything. And then by the time you came home from work that night, I was in bed, and I think I said to you, I feel like I have the flu. Like I just felt like it was so hard for me to do anything. Like even walking the dogs around the block, I was like, I can't even go up. We have this like little hill that we do on our first block here. I could barely go up the hill. I think like I literally was like, yeah, we're not doing that. So I just walked a little bit straight, and then I was like, I gotta go home. It was really difficult for me to, yeah, do anything that was strenuous on my body, including walking up a hill on a block. So that was really intense and really interesting. And then the following probably 2 more days, I was very weak. I was constantly lightheaded. I was constantly like, "Oh my god." We went apple picking because I thought that was a good idea. And I mean, I could barely do anything. And that was not fun because I want to really enjoy that. But yeah, but I still didn't want food. I was just really physically drained, and I could tell my body was obviously working hard. I mean, this is the first time that it hasn't gone with food my entire life for this long, unless, I was sick, but like I wasn't sick this time. I was intentionally fasting. And so, yeah, that was a pretty interesting experience, being that drained and being that weak.
And did that bring up anything emotionally, being that drained physically and that weak?
Yep. I'll tell you the biggest thing that it brought up for me was deep sadness. So, like, the one thing that I struggle with right now on my path is that anything and everything I put into my body hurts me. So I spend most of the day just in pain, and like it's interesting because the physical pain that I'm feeling really sabotages my healing journey because I'm so focused on how shitty I feel that it doesn't allow me a lot of times to like go into the depths of what's actually going underneath the physical pain, which is all the emotional stuff. And so now that I didn't have food and now that I didn't, wasn't wasting any time focusing on that, the amount of sadness that was coming up for me was crazy. It was sadness that I felt about life. It was sadness that I felt about animals. It was sadness that I felt about this existence. And that's what was full throttle in my awareness 24/7 as I started to not focus on my physical body and food anymore. It was that.
Right, and the pain aspect. This can be true for anything in our lives. When we're so burdened down with physical pain, it can be hard to think about anything other than that, because that's where all of our awareness is. How do we not think about that thing when the only noise that we hear, it like drowns out everything else, is help me, this
Yeah.
hurts, this sucks, ow.
Yeah.
When we have something physical like that, it really can, not saying it does, but it can completely like envelope our entire consciousness. And obviously when you're fasting, then everything to me seems to get amplified.
Yeah.
Is that your experience as well, of like when you fast, it's like the dial on everything gets turned up?
Yeah. Yep. And, as I was moving through this, I was like, even though the emotional pain is painful for me to feel, I prefer it much more than to the physical pain that I endure every single day. And so it almost felt like whatever is here, I can deal with this. I can handle this. But the physical pain to me is so much worse than the emotional pain that was coming up. And I just felt much more, even though I was really weak, I felt much more clear. Like I could just sit with myself and I could just open without having to constantly come back to the fact that my stomach hurt. And it just allowed me to like really be with what was asking to be felt more so than I've ever felt, which was such a beautiful gift and blessing. And I wish that for myself every single day, that I could be that open and in tune with what I'm feeling instead of getting so pulled, back from what my body is feeling.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like for anyone that listens to this podcast a lot, they'll hear Ellie and I talk about how we're the opposite in many ways, and it's just fascinating to me to hear that when you fast, I do understand the whole feeling clearer, and I want to get to that. But for the most part, for me, it's just complete agony. And so the fact that for
He
you,
suffers.
yeah, which we'll get to. But for the fact it's so wild that, take one person, remove food, and for you it's this almost enjoyable experience because now you don't have to feel the physical pain and discomfort of what food does to your body.
Yeah.
And for me, it's the complete opposite. It's not having the comfort of having food in my belly. That's what causes me pain and emotional discomfort. So it's just really, really interesting especially to be with you, especially for the first 48 hours, to watch you just glide right through
Yeah.
and just carry on life like it was completely normal, and not to be in any emotional or physical distress, while I was suffering so greatly on the inside.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the fourth day, I mean, I was just so weak and I was so drained. I was doing fine. Like I still wasn't hungry. I still wasn't craving anything. Like, yeah, I would watch some Instagram videos of people cooking food and like I'd be like, yeah, I want that, but I didn't really want it. I could tell for the first time in my life, like what was actually a craving, what was coming from my mind, and then what my body was asking for. And my body was not asking for anything that my mind was saying that I wanted, which was really fascinating to experience. And then it made me really sad because it made me see how much I give into my mind instead of my body. And so that was really disheartening, honestly, because I forsake myself that much and just give in to what the pleasure part of my brain wants. So by the fourth day, I was still so weak. I mean, I couldn't function as like my body was just working so hard. And I just brought in like an organic juice on the fourth day and I felt myself just coming alive. And I was like, oh my God, that was like the most delicious thing I've ever tasted. And then so I decided to continue to 7 days. And so basically for the next 3 days, I just drank a juice a day. And I made it at home. It was all organic and it was delicious. And I remember the 6th day, I made this juice for myself and I felt my stomach bloat. And I felt like I had just eaten a meal. And I realized, like, holy shit, my body is, there's far deeper things that are going on with my body that are not right. Because how can you fast for 6 days and drink a juice and then feel bloated like you just ate a meal? So that's something that I'm really allowing to come up, that like there's a tremendous amount of work that I need to be doing on my gut, coupled with all the emotional work that I'm doing. Um, and then, even by day 7, when I ate food, I was like, I think I could have gone much longer. And I told Danny, I was like, I could feel fear of me getting off this fast. I didn't want to get off this fast because it was the first time I actually felt good. It was the first time where like I put clothes on and I didn't feel like a heifer. I didn't feel bloated. I didn't feel uncomfortable. I felt good. Like waking up in the morning without all this stomach pain was amazing. And I could feel that I knew that as soon as I got off this fast, I would experience pain again. And that's exactly what happened. And I find myself a lot going back to these last 7 days, the fasting days, and like wishing so bad to be in that again, even if I was weak, like wanting that so much, which just tells you how much physical pain that I'm actually in every single day. So yeah, I learned a lot. I saw a lot. There's still so much for me to work on as I go on.
And just to clarify, because we set out to do 3 days, 72 hours, right? And you got to that point, 72 hours, day 3, Saturday. We've been out apple picking, and you decided to keep going.
Yeah.
So you went another full day till Sunday. So you did 4 days, which is, try and do the math real quick, 96 hours.
Yeah.
96. Did you make it the full 96? Or can you remember when you stopped? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then around hour 96, 4 days in, you were like, okay, I'm going to drink a juice, but I want to keep going. Which is just like legendary. That's so powerful. And for anyone listening, I, in the past, did a 48-hour fast. I've done fasting a few times, and I ended with a juice, and it gave me, and I've read about this, the worst diarrhea that I've had.
You're right.
It was really bad. So for anyone listening to this, just be warned, do your research first, and it's all about feeling into what your body needs. Ellie's body needed that juice.
Yeah.
And so when you had it, it didn't have a negative impact, correct?
No.
Wildly positive.
Wildly positive.
Yeah. In fact, I'm sure you would have been jumping for joy if you would have had diarrhea.
Yeah. And that was another thing too. Like, for those of you guys don't want to hear anything about poop, like, then close your ears, because part of the severe gut issues I have is I have a really hard time going to the bathroom. And during the 7 days, I didn't go to the bathroom once. And so when I heard that Danny was like having diarrhea this fast, I was like so envious. And it was just showing me like, man, there's a lot going on with my gut. That's pretty deep and pretty not great. So yeah.
Yeah. And this is what I felt personally. When going into these fasts, it can be normal to have constipation coming out of one. And I've had that before. The last time I did a 3-day fast, which was this time last year, I had the worst constipation I've ever had in my life. It took me about an hour or two to use the bathroom when it was finally that time a few days later. And it was really, really painful. So this time, and since then, I've been really cognizant to use magnesium and to get a really good quality one, and to try and supplement with minerals. Different to taking actual food. I'm talking about like there's a magnesium, potassium, like sodium mix that I take, and then make sure I get salt in every day, like real salt, just to help the body move through that process of elimination. And generally what I felt is when I stop eating, I go into survival mode. My body is like, oh my God, there's no food here. There's nothing for us to survive. And internally what I feel is this constriction. And obviously when that happens, that means there's no movement of your elimination system, because everything is like, oh my God, like we're not being fed. We need to hold on to everything. Like internally, that's the mechanism, is the body goes, we need to hold on to all of this stuff that's in here because we're not being fed anything. And so energetically, this is where the work starts to come in, is we have to energetically provide the right energy and signals to all of our neurology, to our whole body, to let it know it's safe right now. You can keep processing everything. You can allow everything to keep moving and keep going as you are. You are safe, you are held, you are loved. And to really feel that on a very deep level, to allow your body to keep operating. Otherwise, you might end up with, constipation at the end of the fast. Prevention's cheaper than the cure. So if instead of having to, blow it all out at the end, if you allow yourself through the fast to do this really deep energetic work and actually allow your body to keep like opening and moving the energy instead of being in survival. And if I may like interject to some of my stories now, like this is what's happened to me in the past when I've done fasting, is I didn't know this work when I first tried fasting, and I had to just force my way through the suffering. And that obviously doesn't heal anything. It allows my body to reset. It does. Internally, I'm going to go through a level of autophagy for sure. But energetically, I'm not actually healing or alchemizing any of the deep survival wounds. I might get a little bit more comfortable with being in survival, but who wants to be in survival? We don't want to get comfortable with living in survival. We want to elevate out of it. We want to energetically connect to our power and become the way of surrender in that moment and be okay with whatever's there. Now, in the past, what I was doing was just learning how to suffer through something. And this is a very like collective, I would say, like toxic masculine trait that we're being fed, especially in the David Goggins and maybe the Joe Rogans and those kind of men which are in the limelight right now, which I listened to for a while. And this is the way they do it. You got to take an ice bath every day. You've got to run 20 miles. You've got to push yourself. So you got to suffer now so that in life you don't have to suffer. And that's kind of the mentality that if you become hard, if you learn to become hard physically, then nothing outside of you can affect you because you're built strong. Well, if that's what you're building energetically, you're never going to elevate out, or you're literally trapping yourself energetically into the frequency that you're at, instead of tapping into your divine feminine nature and allowing yourself to process everything that's in there and actually move through the different layers of healing that needs to happen. And so the other times that I've fasted, it just, if anything, it further programmed in the survival. I hate this. I don't want to experience this. It feels like I'm dying. This is everything that comes up for me when I fast. And this time was a huge, big shift for me, like completely different. Do you feel like you had a lot of that survival energy like come up that you had to work through?
No. I didn't. That was the difference between you and I. Like, I didn't feel any survival. All I was feeling was like the sadness that I've, been attached to my entire life. But your experience was fascinating to witness. I'm looking at me and I'm looking at you. This man was dying. Like by day 2, you look dead. Like you were not in a good place. And then I'm looking at myself, I'm like, not experiencing any of that. So yeah, go into what you experienced in the first 24 hours alone. In the first 24 hours, you're dying.
Yeah. So give just a little more backstory. This is something that I've done a fair bit of. Not a lot, but since last year I got the nudge to start fasting. So I know Ellie and I have recorded podcasts on this before, but I did a 3-day fast last year, and I did lots of 24 and 48-hour fasts. But there was this huge part of me that was resisting doing the 32. And the 3 days, the 32-hour fast, that's like the big kahuna for like small fasts. When you start talking plus 3 days, you're talking about a longer fast. But a 3-day is like it's a good one, right? And I, like Ellie was sharing, I kept on trying to do it, and I would only get to like 48 hours, and I'd be like, this is enough. And so when we got the message from Rachel, I was like, all right, this is it. It's time to do this 3 days. So by first day, when we started Wednesday, by Thursday I was just miserable the whole day. What comes up for me is I get this ball in my beneath my rib cage, above my belly button, like right where the solar plex is, like right there. It feels like a big ball of tangled yarn, and it just sits, and it almost kind of sits in my throat. If anyone has ever felt sick, and they kind of like sick to their stomach, but they feel it in their mouth as well at the same time, you can almost like taste it. That's how I feel the whole time that I'm fasting. And this is something I did a lot of fasting in 2021 before I found this work, when I was on a ayahuasca retreat. So I learned fasting there, and I dabbled in it. I had some experience. And so this was probably like the 4th or 5th 3-day fast that I've done. And I was expecting to suffer, and the suffering was there, and I was taking all the stuff. And everything shifted when I showed up to our coaches forum on the Friday. It was a noon call, so it was like right at lunchtime. So just coming up to that, like we were up at like probably like hour 44, 45 mark. And I put my hand up, was like, I need coaching right now. I'm miserable. I'm really not in a good place. And where I was guided through to was just this kid that I could just see my mom's face, and it was just so attached, and he felt very weak, very small, very powerless, and just empty. And in place of that emptiness, I could just see her face. I could see her face. She was smiling. It was glowing. But this was the part of me, or is the part of me, because I'm still working on it, that is just attached to her, is in need, is in deep anguish, is in pain, feels empty, and just wants her to take all of that pain away. And how then that manifests physically is, I don't want to feel empty, so I fill myself up with food. And when I eat, I feel good when I'm full, because when I'm full, it's the opposite of empty. And so there was a lot of resistance that I could feel that was going into this program of emptiness. And I was just working with a client today about this. It's quite funny, guiding them into like the same kind of thing, this deep anguish. And they shared, like, just allowing the space to move through the resistance. I know what to do on the other side. I know when I can feel the power that I am, when I can connect to that, I know what to do in that space. But often the programs of resistance that we've built, they're so strong, and they can be a very big challenge and block to go to move through on our own. And that's why coaching in this work, obviously, it's so transformational, because I had some amazing guidance. And as I was guided through all the different layers of resistance that were showing up, and I really connected deeply to my heart, after that, I was good. That was it. That was like the complete shift. And yeah, I still had to move through a lot of weakness that was showing up, but I wasn't in resistance. So I wasn't now suffering. I wasn't miserable, because I was able to just be like, this sucks, and that's okay. I feel weak, and that's okay. So that carried on until the next morning, which would have been day 3. And next morning I was like, I feel really good. I could keep going, but I don't need to. I don't need to be rigid right now and keep going. I can probably, I've done a 3-day fast. I can stop early. So I decided at about hour 66, I was like, I'm just gonna eat. I'm just gonna eat. I don't need to do the 72. I've done 72s before. This is all the manipulation of my programs. And that powerless, weak part of me managed to weave its wonderful little manipulative web and convince me to eat early. And as I said, I've fasted in the past. Normally, when I've fasted and I eat that first meal, the refeed, it's the most magical experience ever because your body has just been through this huge detoxification process. It's starving. It really wants to be fed. And I ate an acai bowl, homemade one. And in the first bite I took, I was like, this doesn't feel good. And I was like, what the hell? Like, normally this like invigorates my body with life. Why does this feel so terrible? And then instead of listening to my body and the reaction, I continued to eat the whole acai bowl. And in reflection, there were several reasons why. The first reason was we were going out for the day. We were going apple picking. We decided we were going to do that. I was off on a Saturday. And I didn't want to feel weak while we were out. And part of the reason why is that when we go out and I show up weak, normally I feel this energy from Ellie and she doesn't like it. And I feel judged and I don't like feeling that way. And I am showing up weak in those moments. And maybe I show up like a little whiny boy, or I'm not, like, fill in the blank. But instead of being okay with showing up like that, I didn't want to show up as weak. So I ate so that I could not feel that way. That obviously massively backfired because my body was very deep in a detox process that when I ate, it actually made me feel 10 times worse. I felt really good that morning and I ate and then I felt awful. And then we went out for the day and I realized like I need to like keep going. I need to restart. So then I carried on for another 55 hours. So I ended up joining Ellie in her fast, just doing my own one. I kind of like restarted. And then the second time that I decided to finish, 55 hours later, it was that glorious, wonderful, amazing experience that I thought I was going to get. And really taught me the big lesson of listen to your body. And it showed me some of the programs, and there's another program that was running, which we can get into in a sec, but some of the programs that run that really disconnect me from listening to myself.
Beautiful share. Go into those programs because go into those programs.
Okay, I'll keep going then. I didn't just want to, babble away. Can do. So the second deeper program that was running was the part of me that fucks everything up. And this part of me just sabotages my path. And it says I'm a fucking idiot. I'm stupid. I'm always wrong. I never do anything right. I'm a failure. And so there's a part of me that still feels that way. And when that's in me, I'm going to create it somewhere in my life. And I realized that night, Saturday night, as I felt so terrible, as I remember like being in bed and I felt so terrible from that meal I had. And I felt so much shame. And all this programs of you're an idiot was coming up and up and up. And I realized that there was this huge part of me that started the fast to get Rachel's validation and approval. That if I could make it 72 hours, then she would be like, oh, good job, Danny. And I could feel that I felt like after I went early, we were in a group chat And I could feel all of this shame that I felt for breaking the fast early. Like, I felt a lot of shame. And I realized that that shame was there because I really just wanted her validation. I really wanted her to be like, oh, good job. Like, you did such a great job. And that was part of the energy that was running when I began the fast. And because that was running, and I have this program that wants to fuck it up because that's what it thinks it does. That's what I think I'm good for, is failing and messing it up. I did that. I literally created that. And then that allowed me to feel that that was in there. And while I'm still looking for this validation, this acceptance outside of myself, it's never going to be, I'm always going to fail. I'm always going to mess up. I'm always going to be that fuck up because I'm looking for the answer of whether I am that or not outside of me, instead of guiding that part of me to be like, no, you don't need to get that person's validation. Get your own validation. And so seeing that was like this huge veil that got lifted, and it made me feel from the energy that I was coming from, which is, I just need to prove that I'm powerful. I need to prove that I'm enough. And when we're in that energy, that's not truly coming from our heart. And so the second phase of my fast was like, the only reason I'm doing this is for me, and that's it. And that was what allowed me to truly find my power in a very different way, because now I wasn't doing it for any other reason than to heal myself. I was doing it because I was listening to what I needed, not what other people said, hey, you should probably do a fast. I could feel in my heart, my body is asking me to continue this process of detoxification. And so I'm going to honor that.
And underneath the wanting validation from Rachel, who is it that you actually are yearning validation from and approval from?
Both mom and dad.
Yeah.
But more, this particular wound is dad. It
Mm.
is, I just want my dad to see me. I want my dad to validate me. I want my dad to understand me. I don't want him to think I'm weak. Because growing up, the energy dynamic was, my mum would coddle that weakness, that powerlessness. And I felt like a lot of shame from my dad. That was that was something I interpreted, but I felt very weak and very powerless and felt a lot of shame for that. And I think I felt like because of that, I wasn't enough. And so I'm looking for that validation from dad, like, hey, am I enough? Am I powerful? Am I strong? Am I a man? And in this scenario, my programs obviously was like, well, if you can do the 72-hour fast that your mentor has kind of invited you to do, then you will be that, and you will get that validation.
Yeah, beautiful. And that's just, just a little nugget for anybody out there, as you're experiencing something at your adult age, really feel into, the inner child and, what the inner child is actually seeking, right? And wanting from another. So yeah, so you did the entire, you went another 55 hours and you had that thing, you felt so much better. And now that obviously we're off the fast, what are some things that you've seen in yourself? What are some things that you've discovered? How did the fast really affect you in a positive and, negative way?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is physically I healed a lot during those two fasts. So like I could feel my body is digesting food better now. It went through a huge detoxification process, physically, and then also linked to that energetically. I felt so clear and powerful in the energy of not eating, because this was the one big thing that I still really resist, because a lot of my programs, that the way that they learn to suppress, and I'll share this last little thing. I know we're running out of time here, but so during the last day, I think it was the last day of the fast, I actually worked with a client. And this is why it's really, really important. It's highlighted to me, the importance of this is I could feel that I was receiving something psychically, because that ball that has unwound a little bit from this last fast, it was lit up. I could feel it glowing, but I couldn't fully receive the message because I could tell that there's so much trauma. So it was like I was psychically receiving something for the client I was working through, but I couldn't get the whole message because there's still so much trauma in there. And that's why it's so important on this path, as somebody who's a coach in this work, to truly heal and evolve and elevate. Because the only, in the way of honoring, like, to be able to serve these clients at the highest level, I have to be a full, clear channel. And when I've had a psychic reading a couple of months ago, she said that your gifts are being blocked by this trauma. And so it was really wild to have her say that, and then have this experience on the last day of the fast where I could really feel this chakra lighting up, and I couldn't fully receive the psychic message. So it's really important to go through this process of healing as a coach in this work, so that I can give the gifts that my higher self is trying to give me, so I can receive. So it's just been a lot of integrating, and I need to fast more in a balanced way. Obviously, I don't just want to jump straight back into not eating again. And the final thing I'll say is, like, through this process, you learn that there is a program around eating for food for sustenance. And that doesn't mean you can do a fast and never eat again, but it allows you to work through this idea that I need food to live. I need food to survive. And the more that we heal and we elevate, we do become more light. And what I've experienced is I need less calories. I need less food, less physical matter to run my body in the exact same way as I did before I started fasting.
Yeah. Beautiful. So to anyone out there, we're probably going to do more fasts in the future, and we're probably going to share when we start on the Discord channel that we have. It's a free Discord channel, so it's probably in the caption below for you guys to join. It's where all of us coaches, Rachel, everybody who's doing this work, everybody who's interested in this work is there, and so we can do a 3-day fast together. It'll be great, and just keep each other accountable. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Share it with anyone that you know, and visit us at masterselfuniversity.com. And until next time, we'll see you guys then. Bye.